many people are celebrating giving of gifts of various kinds, right? I see some nodding already. Maybe people are thinking about their shopping list after here, what else you're hoping to acquire for friends and family. But the Buddhist concept of offerings is a little bit different. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, a very brief story. So I usually get up before my husband wakes up, well, just maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And on the occasions where we wake up at the same time, the first thing he always says to me is, "Did you make coffee?" And I always say, "No," because I actually stopped drinking coffee several years ago and I switched over to tea. It was too much caffeine for me. But, I was thinking about it like a week or so ago, and I was like, I wonder, why don't I make him a cup of coffee in the morning? What is it that's holding me back? I'm being a little miserly maybe with my time, or I'm thinking, well, I'm making my own thing, you make your own thing, and we'll just do it like that. So for the past week or so, I've been making him a cup of coffee in the morning while I make my tea. And it's been really interesting to observe my mind just in this simple act of doing something for my partner, because there was a whole gamut of thoughts that came up. Like, oh, aren't I a good wife? Oh, I'm just doing such a good job right now. And then other days when I was kind of tired and a little cranky, it's like, do I have to do this again? No one asked me to do it. I am like already bargaining with myself. Do I have to do it again? I was like, oh, that's interesting. Other days, just appreciating the smell of the coffee, because I actually love coffee. It's just too strong for me. So like the smell of the beans, and then, we have one of those little like glass carafes. So you have a special like paper filter that you fold, and it's like a little origami in the morning, and you put it, it's very like pleasurable noticing that. And then also just kind of on some days, it's just very simple, just kind of doing it like out of appreciation. And so that was interesting to notice too. And so I tell you that story because I think we're going to get into a little bit of this relationship of the person who gives, the person who receives, and what is this making offerings kind of as a practice, as a spiritual practice about. So you have probably noticed many times there are offerings on this altar. And if you come for a special occasion at the temple, you might be requested to bring an offering for the altar. So this practice of making offerings to Buddha figures and other Bodhisattva figures or on an altar is intertwined with our Buddhist history. And we learned on a trip to monasteries in Korea a couple of years ago, it was very popular to donate fruit to the monks. So this beautiful like displays of fruit, which we were assured would still be cut and eaten and enjoyed by the monks. So I was happy about that. So you'll see we have flowers, candles. Sometimes people bring special offerings of food, which are enjoyed by the residents. And then we also have this little bowl. And if you've never come up and look in there, you might be wondering, what is that? It's a water bowl, so a water offering. And I was remembering several years ago, one of our Dharma teachers in one of our other temples told a story about how she had once asked our founding teacher, who died just a couple of years ago, Venerable Samusunam, who was a Korean monk by training, if he could translate a few lines of this intro. So that short chant that we do, the 3 jewels, is an excerpt of a longer chant that is done at the temple morning and evening. And in the morning version, there's sort of this beautiful preamble. And there's no, sort of not like necessarily, there's an English translation, but maybe not quite as direct as she was looking for. So she asked Sunam, what does this part mean? Because it's a making of an offering kind of preamble. And he said that the connotation of it is that through our devotional heart and practice, we can turn this water into tea. And that in Korea, in times of great poverty, there may not have been tea to offer on the altar, but there was always water. But through this devotional offering practice, that there was this notion of this becomes tea in a sense. I thought that was really beautiful. So offerings are sort of intertwined with our Buddhist practice, but there's a lot to dig into with those. So I'm going to tell you a few stories, and we'll kind of explore the shape of this practice of making offerings. But maybe it's helpful just to start with kind of a simple definition. And as what's the word? Serendipity would have it. When I was doing a little bit of research on Buddhist offerings, I found an article by Venerable Chodron from Sravasti Abbey. She is a nun out of Washington State and runs a modern nunnery, Buddhist nunnery for women out of Washington State. And we actually met her on this trip to Korea. So she says, the practice of Buddhist offerings is about accumulating positive potential, purifying clinging and miserliness, and creating a transformative effect on our own mind. So kind of a two-parter, accumulating positive potential, purifying clinging and miserliness, with the effect of creating a transformative effect on our own mind. That's what she says it's about. Okay, so the three stories, hopefully we'll have time for that, and then also some discussion. We'll see how it goes. So first story, kind of maybe about the, if not purifying, at least recognizing this clinging and attachment of mind, is my story. And the one that comes to mind is a few years ago, I had served as the kitchen master on some of our long meditation retreats. We call it the position tenzo, which is actually a Japanese term, but sort of the person who's in charge of feeding all of the retreat participants their 3 meals a day, managing all the food stocks, planning the menu, and sort of like running the production of the meals themselves. And there's a little bit of pressure on this role because the schedule of the retreat is very strict. So we have a certain amount of time to get things done in, usually not quite enough time. And then also there should be not a spirit of just rushing around like a chicken with your head cut off, as my mom would say, but also bringing your practice into this kitchen work. So it's a little bit challenging. And I had done the tenzo position maybe once or twice before. And each time my teacher, Hajusunam, who is not here today, but would usually be sitting right here, would encourage me to keep it simple. Keep it simple, Jacques. So each time I would attempt this meal planning and delivery of food, I had that in mind. And each time after I was done with the retreat, the feedback was still, it wasn't very simple. You need to simplify it more. And so it became kind of like this koan. Well, what does that mean, simple? And so I recall this third attempt of being the kitchen master. And I was really keeping that simplicity in mind with the meals. And I remember one of the meals was brown rice, tofu, and 2 kinds of pickles. So I thought, oh, I really nailed it this time. How could it be more simple, right? And yet, at the end of the retreat, my teacher said, it could be a little bit more simple. So I remember feeling like a little bit confused, maybe a little bit defeated, and also still very curious because I hadn't yet understood what she was trying to convey. And so maybe a year or 2 after that, I myself was a retreat participant in New York City with for our summer annual retreat, where all of the members and teachers get together for an annual meeting and a retreat. And I was not the tenzo on this particular retreat, which I was somewhat glad about because it was about 20-something people. And yet I was on the kitchen crew. And so I had opportunity to observe how this other teacher, one of our teachers from Mexico, ran the kitchen and sort of the food that she prepared. It was also an incredibly challenging retreat because there was a heat wave in New York City and we had no air conditioning in our building. And so we were sitting retreat hours a day, like me personally, pouring sweat. It was very hard for me. And I remember sitting down one day to lunch, and I was trying to keep with my practice, and I was eating the food. And the food was sort of so beautifully unremarkable that I wasn't even entirely sure. It was like a soup or something. I wasn't even entirely sure what was in it, but it was completely non-distracting. And yet it filled me up, and I felt like, okay, I can do some more sitting in the afternoon. And I thought, oh, maybe the simplicity is because I wasn't actually thinking about the food's effect on other people. Because with meditation retreats, we're really trying to nourish people, but we're not trying to stimulate them in like a way that is distracting. And so if your food is almost too something, too delicious, too spicy, too much lemon, too much garlic or something like that, it's a little bit distracting. And so when I was eating this soup, and I remember eating it, and I love food, so I never forget a meal. I'm eating the soup, and I remember thinking, I have no attachment to this soup whatsoever. How strange. And I thought, oh, maybe that's the simplicity. So there's something about the opportunity of these making offerings, in this case, the food, which maybe sounds like kind of a mundane offering, but still, I think it counts, to have a different perspective on what the effect is on other people. And I think in retrospect, I hadn't really fully digested what impact my food would have on other people in this setting. Hadn't really necessarily considered that. I was really just focused on the number of ingredients or what it looked like in the bowl or something like that. And I kind of missed the point, I think. So I don't know, because Haju's not here to tell me if that if I finally cracked the koan. But that is what I think at this moment, and it will still be a koan. So I think in this example, then, the making offerings practice is the opportunity to really recognize and try to work with that interrelationality of the offering. So not just about me, but about everyone else, right? Okay, so that's the first story. The second story, and I apologize because I do not have a printer. I'm going to read a little bit from some Buddhist history. So this is a story I had heard, again, I think maybe from Haju many years ago, and it occurred to me as I was thinking about this topic. So there is a story from the time of the Buddha about a man and wife who were quite poor, and they lived in a little hut. And between the two of them, they had only one outer garment to wear. So they had sort of like their underwear, and then they had the one outer garment that you could wear outside the home. And so they shared it. And so when the wife would go out, the wife would wear the outer garment and then come home. And then when the husband would go out, she would stay behind and he would wear the outer garment. So he was known as the Brahmin of the one robe. So that is the literal translation of his name. And as the story happens, and I'll read you a little bit of the kind of lovely, slightly archaic translation. The Buddha comes to teach in the town where these folks are living. And they're very interested to go and hear him speak. But they can't go at the same time because they only have one outer garment, right? So they say, the husband says to the wife, what would you like to do? We would both like to go and hear him speak. And the wife says, well, I'll go in the daytime and you can go in the evening. So she goes out, she wears the garment, she hears the lectures, and she comes home. And then there's going to be meditation and maybe some type of other events through the evening. And so the husband goes out and joins the group of people to hear the Buddha. And as he's sitting there in meditation, he is really overcome with this desire, impulse, thought that he should donate the garment to the Buddha as an offering. So let me read to you what he is thinking. As he listened to the law, so this lecture, the 5 sorts of joy arose within him, suffusing his body. He greatly desired to honor the teacher, but the following thought restrained him. If I give this garment to the teacher, there will be no garment left for me or my wife. 1,000 selfish thoughts arose within him. Then a single believing thought arose within him. Then the thought of self arose within him and overmastered the believing thought. Even so did the mighty thought of self seize, as it were, and bind and thrust out the believing thought. I will give it. No, I will not give it, said the Brahmin to himself. As he thus reflected, the first watch passed and the second watch passed. So this is like a measure of time, a few hours. Even then, he was not able to bring himself to give the garment to the teacher. Then the last watch came. Finally, he thought, while I have been fighting with thoughts of faith and thoughts of self, 2 watches have elapsed. If these powerful thoughts of self increase, they will not permit me to lift up my head from the state of suffering. I will therefore give my gift. So he takes the garment and lays it at the teacher's feet, and he shouts, I have conquered! I have conquered! And so there is a king in attendance who appears in many Buddhist sutras and was a benefactor of the Buddha. And he overhears this, and he's very curious. Go and ask that man, what is he shouting about? You know? And so when the king hears what this offering has been and why, he is so moved that he brings many beautiful garments for the man. And there's an interesting detail in here. So he says, the king directed 32 pairs of garments to be presented to the Brahmin, but to avoid having it said, the Brahmin has kept not a single pair for himself, but has given away every pair he received, he said to the Brahmin, keep 1 pair for yourself and 1 for your wife. And I think that's really, it's maybe not the point of this story, but I think it's an important detail, because we could easily take this story to mean that we should become martyrs, or that we should give more than we are capable of surviving without, right? And so I really appreciate that little detail. The king says, make sure you keep 1 for yourself and your wife, you know, be practical. And also he's so moved that he makes this gift. But then towards the end, we hear from the Buddha himself. So the Buddha overhears the monks like whispering about this event, and he's curious. So he asks, what are you talking about? And the monks explain. And the Buddha says, monks, had the Brahmin been able to bring himself to give me his gift in the first watch, first time it occurred to him, first part of the evening, he would have received the gift of 16. So he's talking about like multiples, right? 16-fold. If he had been able to do it in the second watch, he would have received the gift of 8s. Because it was not until late in the last watch that he gave me the gift, he received only the gift of 4s. He who does good works should not put away the impulse to good that arises within him, but should act on the instant. So, yeah, I really resonate with the story of the sort of internal wrestling that he's doing, because I think we can all relate to that experience of seeing a situation, kind of knowing I should help, I can help, and I should help right now. And then there's reasons why not? I'm busy, or I'm not sure how to help, or this and that. But we kind of had that first, as it's described in the story, the first believing thought, and then the thoughts of self. And so he's talking about how through cultivation of acting on the first thought of faith, we can kind of counteract, short circuit all of this self-rumination that might be holding us back from making a true offering. And yet we also have this teaching that we shouldn't give in such a way that we ourselves are so depleted that it's harmful. So the king noticing, keep one of the robes for yourself and your wife. And then the Buddha also reminding us, instant action counts the most. Just go do it, So there's a lot of interesting lessons in that story. Okay, and then the last one I want to share is also from slightly further in Buddhist history, but much more modern. And this is from our Korean tradition. So there is a book called Echoes from Mount Gaea by Songchol Sunim, who is a very famous Korean Buddhist monk who died in the 1990s. Was born in the late 1890s, I believe, so lived quite a long life, and was at one point the head of the Choge order in Korea, sort of one of the key monastic orders. And he has a kind of cheeky take on this making of offerings, because from his point of view, one of the biggest pitfalls is pride. So thinking about making offerings out of a sense of wanting something for yourself. And I think similar to the story of the robe, there is like a shade of pride, maybe a subtle version of pride that is when we tie our self-worth to the good works that we do. That is kind of a form of pride, but maybe we wouldn't identify it as such. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. To make an offering in the way I have described, and then to boast about it, ruins the offering completely. There are a lot of people who make offerings for their own ego, for their own public relations campaigns. That is not an offering. It is merely making your own publicity materials. We should not ruin our offerings with our mouths. The Buddhist way is to make offerings anonymously. Jesus said, "Don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing." I'm glad that more and more young people today are listening to this kind of thinking. I get letters from students who say they will make offerings this way for the rest of their lives. Let me tell you a story that happened shortly after the Korean War. I was staying in a temple called Songjusa outside the city of Masan. Hanging on the front of the Buddha Hall was a big banner that read, "Mr. Yoon so-and-so financed Buddha Hall restoration." I asked who this Mr. Yoon was, and they said he ran an herbal medicine shop in Masan, and that he had paid for the entire restoration out of his tremendous faith. I asked when he might be coming, and they said that if he knew I were there, he would come immediately. The next day, Mr. Yoon showed up to greet me. I told him that everyone was praising his outstanding faith, and that I too had been impressed when I first read the banner. You could tell by the glimmer in his eyes that he loved praise. I then told him, however, the banner was in the wrong place. Banners were for lots of people to see, and if he hung it up there in the mountains at the monastery, few people would see it. I told him to take the banner the following day to Masan, where he should hang it up in front of the railroad station. He got the message. Okay, so then there's one other short story. Once I gave a number of examples of these quiet offerings to students, and one student said, "Well, Sunim, you're not making any offerings. Why are you telling us to?" My reply was that teaching how to make offerings was an offering in itself. Even just 20 years ago, there were many poor people living on the outskirts of Seoul, Busan, and other major cities in Korea. Someone came to me who wanted to distribute food to these people and asked, "How can I go about this without anyone finding out?" I told him that first, he should have a couple of people go to the area to do a survey and make a list of the needy. Then have a couple of other people go to the nearest rice shop, have tickets made, and arrange it so that the residents who bought tickets would get rice. Then have other people go around carrying rice to attract attention and distribute the tickets. Then have another group of people at the rice shop give rice to those who brought tickets and matched the list. If they kept changing the people out all the time, no one would find out. I told him, that if the residents asked, the workers should merely reply that they were doing it for someone else. At first, the needy people did not believe there was free rice, so they hesitated to go to the shop. But after enough prodding, since the shop was close by, they went there and came home with rice. One day, a kid coming home from school was heard to comment, "Something really weird is going on in our neighborhood. These strangers have come, they give rice tickets, and people are getting free rice so that they will not go hungry. The strangers must have come from out of the sky." There is always a way to remain anonymous. Then, once in Masan, somebody anonymously provided a truckload of rice at the Harvest Moon Festival. The newspapers caught wind of it and wrote up a big story. The man featured in the story, I assume, came to me, and I accused him of doing it intentionally to make headlines for himself. He insisted that it was not his intention, but that there was no way the reporters would not find out. I told him I was nevertheless suspicious of his motivations and that he should have found a way of doing it so he could have remained anonymous. Many years ago, there was an old benefactor in the countryside, and a youth of the village came to pay his respects to the man for his many contributions. The youth said, "How noble you are! Being rich in itself is a great blessing, but what could be a greater blessing than sharing it with others?" The man responded, "You little creep! When did I ever help anybody? Helping somebody else is like having ringing ears. You know your ears are ringing, but nobody else does. Good works, benevolence, what benevolence? If you're going to talk about benevolence, get lost." This old benefactor is a perfect example of making true offerings. Helping others can be easy, or it can be difficult, but even more difficult is keeping quiet about it. So, at this point, I think we have enough time to do a little bit of reflection and discussion then as a group, because I'm curious how these stories have struck you. And I have a little bit of a reflection exercise that we can try that is designed to help us think about, notice, observe any differences in our disposition towards giving and receiving, okay? So at this point, just maybe sit a little bit more formally. Allow your eyes to close. Checking in with your breathing. And we're going to think about 3 scenarios that you may have experienced. Just allowing a memory to come into your mind's eye. The first one is, remember when you may have received a small, unexpected gift of some kind, an incidental act of generosity. Could be very, very small. So just thinking about an unexpected, small act of generosity that you experienced. Once you have that in mind, the next one is thinking about then when you maybe performed some small, unexpected act of generosity. So you were the giver or the doer of this act of generosity. And then finally, think about a time when you were the receiver of a big act of generosity. What did that feel like? So thinking about those 3. receiving an unexpected small gift of some kind, giving an unexpected small gift of some kind, and then receiving something big act of generosity or a thing of some kind. And just reflecting on anything that you notice, feeling tones that come up, thoughts, physical experience of that. Are they similar? Are they different? Just resting in that experience for a couple of breaths until you hear the bell. So I'm curious, you can pass the microphone if you have comments, but I'm curious if you noticed anything in that reflection. Was there anything in common with those experiences, different? Was it different being a giver or a receiver? Sort of what might you have noticed from that?
I think it's hard for me to be a receiver and a giver. Maybe it's because I worked in high-end designer retail for so long, but I'm really good at giving gifts. And sometimes I can go a little overboard with the giving of the gifts. That when it comes to receiving, sometimes it's very, very difficult. And so what I was thinking about was like a small, like just received like something small, but it was so big to me, as I was just doing yoga the other day, and my instructors over Zoom, and they said what they always say, which is thank you for coming to this practice. And usually I respond back, well, thank you for this and this and this and blah blah blah. But I just held it, and I was filled with light, and I said, "You're welcome."
Oh, no, I think. Oh, yes. There was someone on this side. Oh, there's someone over here. Yes.
I sometimes speak kind of off track. Receiving gifts, favors, can sometimes be very difficult. Sometimes it can be misconstrued as control. Like if I've hurt my shoulder, and if someone offers to help me put my coat on, if it's my wife, I usually say, no, I can do it. I can do it. I don't want to feel weak that I can't use my left shoulder. And so that's something which comes up sometimes with close friends and relatives and stuff like that. I end up rejecting an offering. Or my offering can be rejected for the same reason. You don't have to hold the door open for me, honey. I can do it myself. In something in my life which plays a large part. And so some of those things are real small offerings. And to accept them and not complicate things with, well, I'm pretty stupid, or I'm too old to put on my coat or something like that, really upsets the whole situation. And can really make a lot of sorrow on the part of the person because their offer is not turned down. So that's what's important about offering and receiving in my life.
So in the time that I was reflecting on receiving a small gift, giving a small gift, and receiving a large one, I noticed like the feelings I had were solely based on my perspective and how I felt about the gift. Because some small gifts I felt gratitude and like thankfulness, and then others I just felt like I might be indebted to this person. And when giving, I had the feelings of like gratitude when I saw their reaction to the gift. As in, if they were surprised and genuine about being excited about it, I felt that inside where it's like, sweet. But yeah, that's my reflection.
Yeah, I'm just gonna echo what others have already said. It was really interesting for me noticing the difference between receiving something small versus receiving something large, and then giving. I'm like I've also been high end service industry, so it's like very. I got very good at curating people's experiences and anticipating what they want and giving it to them so that they have an emotional reaction, right? And receiving has always been harder for me, but when Jagwa asked us to think of something small, well, I'll say first, when you asked to think of something big, immediately what came up was what a couple other people have said is like, there's a sense of actually the other person is wanting to control me or get something from me. There's a transaction rather than a free gift or exchange. But when you asked about something small, a memory came up immediately of when I was living in Costa Rica. I was teaching some Qigong classes and was requesting just, donations if you have something great. If you don't, just come to class, right? And one woman gave me like 2,000 colones, which would be like $4. But what I remember about it, I don't even remember how much she gave me or if she gave me money. I think she did. But what really stuck out to me was she gave me a stick of cinnamon that she'd been carrying with her on her journeys and a small tiger's eye. And it really moved me. It really hit me because she was like, it was so clear to me that she just wanted to give this. It was important to her to give this, and so it was important for me to receive it. I still have both of those items. I carry them with me. So yeah, thank you for that.
Anything else? Here's one.
So I suppose I haven't contemplated upon it much, but there are tons of small things within my life that I've been able to receive. But I think that in the giving and the receiving, I haven't really thought too much about it. I just kind of did it. So, for example, my dad makes coffee in the morning on the days that he isn't going to swim before work. And sometimes that can be annoying because his coffee has more caffeine in it than mine. And he makes me a cup. And sometimes I get up and I either couldn't sleep last night or stayed up really late and I'm super tired, so I need that. Well, don't need it, but I get that extra boost and I'm happy for that, but I don't think too much about it. And then there's the days where I'm like, I got so much sleep last night and this is too much. So I haven't thought too much about it, but on certain times, it's actually really a good gift, really a blessing. And others, it's kind of like, I want to receive this gift. I'm happy to receive it, but at the same time, I don't know if I want it. So I think that that's interesting to witness, how on certain points in time, your mind can work with a act of gratitude differently. And also giving a gift works the same way, like when giving tea. I often make tea at home, but oftentimes I don't think about it, and sometimes I'm like, oh, now I have to wait for the tea to boil, and it's gonna whistle super loud, But I find that really interesting to witness.
Well, thank you all. We don't have a tidy wrap up, but I think just taking a moment to think for yourself what you might carry forward. Did anything shift in your understanding of gifts and offerings, or anything that you aspire to better understand about that practice, both in the spiritual sense and maybe in the regular everyday world sense, which of course are not necessarily separate. So thank you all for sharing your stories. I think we have some announcements. Do you want the microphone?
Let me see. Just maybe click it on there. This is a good example for me, like receiving things is kind of difficult, oh, don't bother, but it's a gift, right, to you to accept.
That's right. There you go.
Well, welcome everyone for being here. Very happy to see you all, especially new people. And after our service today, we'll be having tea in the foyer if you'd like. Hang around and say hello. We have several events coming in this kind of holiday season. One of which is a retreat. It's a working person's retreat, and it goes from December 26th, the day after Christmas, to the 30th. So please come and sit with us early in the morning, 6 a.m., and in the evening at 6:30 p.m. And for those that come in the morning, you can expect a delicious vegetarian breakfast, and we have a sign-up sheet in the foyer. Also, please join us for the year-end candle lighting service. We call it the Kindling Light of Wisdom Mind. That will be held on December 31st from 8 to 10 p.m. And an occasion to take stock of your life and to greet the new year in contemplation and reflection. Everyone's welcome to come share this beautiful service with us. We also have a special New Year's Day service on January 1st at 11:30. Is that correct? Okay. So about the same time, except it'll be starting on Thursday.
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday.
Okay.
Wednesday.
And also, this is one I definitely need input on. For Buddha's enlightenment sitting Friday afterwards, is that the 10th? Okay. And it begins at 8 p.m. Come to meditate to awaken your true nature, inspired by Shakyamuni Buddha, who sat under the Bodhi tree and came to freedom. You can sit from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. or 10 p.m. to midnight. And if you're really into it, I've done this. It is pretty tremendous. You can stay until 4 a.m., at which time we journey outside to see if we can find the morning star, look up in the sky, and also it gives us an opportunity to offer flowers, fruit, candles, nuts, incense, dried fruit, money for the altar. It's a wonderful occasion.
Any gruel, someone?
Oh, the grill. You must have heard about that. It is amazing. It's just, I don't know where it got its name. And yeah, that's a real treat. So we do have a fundraiser going now as well, but one other opportunity to contribute to the temple would be even your time. If we have this group called Together Action, it's more on Saturdays, 3 to 5 now. Although we used to do a lot right after the service. Hopefully, when the weather warms up, we'll do some more. And we have meditation 6:30 to 8:30 on Wednesdays after work, if you're interested. So I guess maybe Maom would like to tell us, or would you like to tell us about the fundraiser?
Just the latest contribution amount is about 13,500 toward the goal that we put out there for 28,000. So we're really grateful for all of the contributions we have received. We have this earmarked for a number of special projects, such as a better sound system for the Buddha Hall, repairing our walkway out front, and various projects in our garden, as well as a scholarship fund. We like to use this scholarship fund to pay for classes when people can't afford them, to pay for Peace Camp, and sometimes even to pay for a residential stay here at the temple. Yeah. So thank you for your participation.
Yes, and this is an organization that's completely organized by our own people in their own time, money, and efforts. If you feel inspired to donate, we also have a donation bowl right outside the door and a little square point of sale where you can just swipe your card. So this week's slightly different because I guess needs to mention yoga won't be taking place until next year now because it's at the end of the year. And we don't have a firm date when it begins, but it's on Tuesdays at 6:30 to 8 or so. So because we don't have yoga on Tuesdays, we can actually leave the mats and cushions here week long. So just feel free to come to the tea and say hello.
I have an
Oh, sure. And maybe Bill John has
You want to
one
go
too.
first?
I just want to announce that Recovery Dharma will be meeting today at noon in the historic Buddha Hall, the big yellow building next door. Up the steps, keep going straight, you'll bump into us. Just make sure you take your shoes off, please.
And this is a little bit unannounced, but earlier this month we held listening sessions on Zoom for people to talk about their feelings post-election. And we had offered, if there was interest, to hold one on a Sunday after service. So I am here to help facilitate that listening session. If we think we have at least 3 or 4 people who would like to stay for 45 minutes to an hour, and I can talk a little bit more about the format if you're curious. Do we think we have anyone who would like to stay today for participating in something like that? And if not, there'll be opportunities in the future. Okay, 1 person. Okay, if you would like to stay, please find me afterwards so that I just know that we'll be holding it. We'll just need a handful who would like to. And just, yeah, let me know, or if you have questions. Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, well, let's end with the 4 great vows. Please repeat after me. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate
I vow to liberate
blind passions one root.
blind passions one root.
I vow to terminate
I vow to terminate
Dharma gates one mind.
Dharma gates one mind.
I vow to penetrate
I vow to penetrate
the great way of Buddha.
the great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
So just taking a moment as we stand to straighten up mats and cushions, leaving them in a tidy way, and then we will end with 3 formal bows in front of the altar.